Mr. Speaker, the open electricity market will commence in Jurong in April 2018, and it will provide around 120,000 household and business accounts with the choice to buy electricity from a retailer with a price plan that best meets their needs. Those who prefer to continue buying electricity from the SP Group at the regulated tariff can also continue to do so. This soft launch will allow the Energy Market Authority, the SP Group, and electricity retailers to gather feedback and fine-tune their processes and back-end systems before the open electricity market is extended to the rest of Singapore in the second half of 2018.
Yes, Mr. William.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I have 5 supplementary questions for Minister. The first is, we do understand that the pilot is in Jurong, and the area is demarcated by postal districts. I understand for the postal code starting from 60 to 64. So I'd like to ask for the rest of the island, whether the plan is actually to also have staggered commencement based on postal districts, or is everybody going to go live at the same time for the rest of the people outside Jurong? That's the first question. The second question is, I understand that there are about 26 licensed retailers of electricity, and EMA, the Energy Market Authority, had previously said that not all the retailers may be involved in the soft launch. So I'd like to ask Minister whether there's any clarity now on whether certain specific retailers will be involved, and whether this was their own choice or some vetting process by the EMA. The third question is that we understand that the EMA has committed to making switching over easy for consumers. I'd like to have some elaboration on that. For example, I assume consumers would have to change their meter boxes, so who's going to pay for that, for example? Fourth question, Minister earlier said that we're having a pilot so that we can also study how it pans out, and if there are any feedback from the pilot, we can fine-tune it for the rest of the island. So I'd like to ask whether the government anticipates certain specific challenges from the pilot, and whether there's a possibility that such challenges and fine-tuning may set the timeline back to beyond 2018 for the rest of the island. And finally, last question, we've noted that in other countries where there's a choice of electricity retailers, there may be information given to consumers about price comparisons. This may be done by the vendors themselves, for instance. And in some of these countries, the regulator actually takes on the role of accrediting whether that information is accurate to ensure that the consumers are not duped or given inaccurate information. An example is, I think, in the UK, where the Ofgem, or the Office of Gas and Energy Markets, does this sort of accreditation of information. So I'd like to ask Minister whether the EMA, for example, is considering such an accreditation role so that the consumers will have accurate information.
May I remind members that supplementary questions may be put for the purposes of elucidating an oral answer. That's under the standing order. So could members keep their supplementary questions short?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for her keen interest in this initiative. And I was heeding your advice, that's why I kept my initial answer short, to allow for supplementary questions. I think there's 5. Let me try and do justice to some of them at least. Pilot in Jurong, does that mean that we'll have staggered implementation across the board? That is exactly why we are having a pilot, because we need to understand, notwithstanding the best of efforts and planning ahead, this is a massive exercise because it will involve over 1 million accounts, island-wide eventually. And that's why the idea of focusing it on one district or one area, like Jurong, which in a way reflects the diversity of our household and business types, and that I think will enable the key entities, EMA, SP, and the retailers to also understand if there are any unanticipated challenges. And it's precisely because they are unanticipated that I can't tell the member in answer to her 4th question, do we anticipate any specific challenges? That's exactly why we're having the pilot, to see if there's something unanticipated or something that's coming in from a different angle that we hadn't foreseen. And that's the purpose behind it. So the answer is, if the pilot goes well, then I think we should be able to stick to the timeline and move towards the second half for complete implementation. If, however, there are reasons to review that, then we will do so and we will convey that. I think the most important point here is the customer experience has to be a good one. And I think we want to avoid having undue disruption or concern amongst our consumers. So I think that's our priority in this exercise. Retailers, yes, there is a vetting process. So EMA is now in the process of vetting and qualifying them. And they're applying a fairly tight set of criteria. And the reason is because, unlike the current situation where the retailers are essentially dealing with businesses who are in the contestable market, I think it's about 90,000 accounts, we are now moving towards households, and therefore there is a need to make sure that there is an appropriate set of rules and capabilities, rules governing their conduct and capabilities that the retailers are able to meet. So this is the process that EMA is going through now in its engagement with the retailers. And before we start the pilot, it should be quite apparent how many and the identity of these retailers. Switching is easy, but what about meters? So again, this is something that will be elaborated, but essentially, the way the open electricity market is designed, and I don't want to get into a very technical discussion, but essentially it means you can do a switch without having to have what they call smart meters or advanced meters. It is possible, and in fact, our system is designed to do that. It's based on a principle called load profiling instead. However, if you have advanced metering infrastructure, it allows for greater flexibility in the kind of plans. And so this is something that EMA is studying. In the commercial market, in general, when they've opted to become contestable and sign up with retailers, they have had some advanced meters installed. In the case of households, it depends, because if their consumption levels are not very high, it may not merit that kind of investment. On the other hand, advanced meters do provide a lot more data, which can be very useful for both policy and for system optimization. So we have to work out the trade-offs in design. Price comparisons or accreditation, the intent is to provide as much information as possible to consumers so that they can make informed decisions. And one part of that, apart from a general communications and media plan, is to have an online portal that will provide comparisons across different types of plans so that customers can then access this and then make the decisions based on their needs, and they're informed by what these different plans offer.
Mr. Peng Eng Huat.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick question. Currently they are replacing the meter outside the house. In Hougang, I saw them change from the big one to a very small. Are those smart meters? Means are they contestable already, though?
I don't know about the specific meter. Are you talking about household meters? So I don't know about the specific meters in Hougang, but I would say in general, the replacement has not been about for households, going towards smart meters, because that's an entirely different exercise. And indeed, when you deploy smart meters, you also need to have some back-end systems that are able to use them. Otherwise, it's effectively a dumb meter because it doesn't do much more than a conventional analog meter. So this is something that we are studying. So I would say that most likely it is not, because there's been no plan to implement advanced metering for households.